Welcome to Between Sundays. I'm Tyler, and I definitely treat your loans to me as a gift. Thank you very much. Today, we're talking about how we might love our enemies to break the tit-for-tat cycle of abuse. But before we remember the grace we've received now that they've been unthankful and wicked, let's be kind to our favorite children of the Most High, Amy and Barry. Good day, guys.
Good day.
Unthankful.
Hello.
Yeah,
I know.
and
So
wicked.
unthankful. And wicked.
But
Yep.
children of the Most High. So we've got that.
I'm unthankful.
Yep.
I'm wicked.
Yep. There you go. You see, you said it.
You
So
never know what he's gonna.
Yeah.
what he's
never
gonna
know
pull.
what he's going to pull out. Nope.
Yeah.
There you go.
Guys, what's new?
Well, we just finished Grace Kids Camp last
Yeah.
week.
Everybody's
it
still
was-
recovering.
Ooh. Yep. It was ooh. No, it was great. It was
Yeah.
a great week.
That's great.
Barry was
Right in the thick of it.
Yep.
I was leading a small group of 5th grade boys.
Yeah.
So they did not walk in a single file orderly line once the entire week. They just went tearing off.
Was everybody
down the hall.
supposed to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And every other group was, even the other 5th grade groups. My group, I don't know if it was me. I don't know what it was.
I think
They
you had
just-
some idealistic notions of what 5th grade boys
Well,
were going to be like.
So I think maybe 4th grade is the sweet spot because 4th
Yeah.
grade.
so you're
they're
going
still-
back on
I'm
what
gonna
you
go
said.
back to.
Yep,
I said
sure.
4th and 5th. I think I'm just gonna say 4th, where they're old enough to like have their own opinions and be, their own people, but they're still kids. They're not so self-conscious. I definitely had some 5th grade boys that were kind of too cool for school. The kind that were like, this game's for kids, and
Yeah.
like I'm not feeling it, and
Right.
they'd kind of be shrugging and sitting down during worship songs and things
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
that. Like,
yeah.
I'm not about to
Yeah.
do moves.
I'm not doing Drive the Bus.
Yeah, no,
which
forget it.
I mean, it is from like 1972, so I get
Yeah, I
why
saw
some
that.
of the kids. We can't not do it. They all love it.
They love
it's
it.
crazy.
We gotta read. We gotta
I
find
know.
a
I
new
wish we could
version of
find.
it.
I know, because those guys are.
It's like
It-
2002. That's what that
Yeah.
video is in
Yeah.
a nutshell. Like editing all
Those
of it.
guys are
Yeah.
like grandparents now, probably. Like they're probably just sitting around, still
Yeah.
raking in some cash from
From
Drive the Bus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it ended Thursday.
Yep.
Evening. We did like
Yeah.
the night thing. Yeah.
Friday morning. All week, my kids went to bed at like 6:15
Ah.
because they were so tired.
Oh,
Yeah.
of course.
From kids camp.
Me too.
Lane woke up Friday morning and he was like, he had tears in his eyes. I'm like, what's wrong, Lane? He goes, I just miss camp.
Oh, that's so sweet.
That is sweet.
Yeah.
I love that.
So he had a good time. Everybody had a good time.
Well, Maggie, my 17-year-old, leads a small group, and she has been with the same kids. Like she started with them in kindergarten, and she leads them every year. But she's tapping out now because they're
Oh,
going.
She's done.
No, she's going to start over with another group in
Oh.
kindergarten because she doesn't want to do 4th and 5th grade kids.
Oh,
So
all right.
this group is going into 3rd, but next year they'll be going into 4th. So she's like, I'm like, well, they're going to be super sad because they
Yeah.
like you a lot. And she's
Nora
like,
Schneider is going to be devastated.
I know. Don't tell her. I can't. I know Nora is going to be really sad. That's
It's not just
Tyler's-
that Maggie's not going to be there. It's
Right.
not like she's moving on.
No,
She'll still be there,
She'll
but
be
with-
there just with
just not with
just
Nora.
different kids.
Laughing
I
and
know.
playing with a bunch of kids.
know, yeah, I think I'm going to try and talk her into staying with her group. I mean, like it's not bad. She also likes to have boys and girls in her group. Like
Oh, sure.
she thinks that's fun to have a mixture.
Yeah.
And when they get to 4th grade,
Yeah,
it's all girls and all boys. So
Yeah.
they don't mix the groups. So yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes I used the fact that the girls groups were so orderly to try to shame the boys.
Yeah,
and
it didn't work
It didn't
at all.
really
No,
work. I'd
they
be like,
don't
look
care.
at them, like they're all
And they'd
doing
be
the
like,
assignment.
Yeah, boring.
Yeah,
Yeah, they
right,
would not.
right.
Yeah, they
Girls stink.
yeah. So it was a really, really good week though. I was really
Yeah.
proud of
Yeah.
the Grace Kids team and the students team, and our volunteers are unbelievable.
Seriously.
Like
it was an incredible. I mean, as a small group leader, you're kind of just swept along by, okay, now we go to crafts. Now we go to
Right.
this. Now, but like everywhere we'd get there, everybody would be ready for us. They'd have the like incredible, everything's all set up and they just take charge of it. It was really, really impressive.
it's really
Yeah.
well organized,
Yeah.
and the kids had a blast, and
Yep.
we had great numbers,
Great
and
drama.
Grace,
The kids were into it. I had
Yep.
one kid that kept getting every time we'd go to big worship, he'd be like, are they going to do the play?
Yeah,
he
I
was
know.
like so into it.
They really do. They love the characters, and they get. That's what I did all week. I was in
Yeah.
the dark auditorium directing the drama, but it was super fun, and they do get so engaged, and they just love it. And
and they
you know.
and they like had a bad guy.
Yeah.
What was her?
Arlie her name was Petra.
Petra.
Yes,
She's the
yeah,
bad
she was
guy.
the bad spy.
And she would like It was like over the top, like looking over her sunglasses
Yes,
and
yes.
saying, "I'm gonna get those,"
Right,
whatever. And
right.
the kids would be like screaming
Yes.
at her, like, "No,
Well,
boo!"
I was the last night there was a chase scene, and I said
Yeah.
to the
She's
I,
actually gonna get tackled.
I
Yeah.
said to the other actors, do not say get her or after her or stop her because they're
kids
already
will
going to do it.
actually,
And
yeah.
but they will. And there were
And they
kids.
did.
Oh, they were running after her.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There were adults that had to like step in
Yeah.
and stop them.
There were two
From
times on
hurting
Thursday
her.
night at the finale or whatever where I was like, "Oh, this isn't planned." Like kids were
No.
about to storm the
Yeah,
stage.
they were.
Right,
They were
And-
all about it.
yeah,
All
and
about it.
The kid who I don't know if I said this last week, probably not, but I saw a kid. I think it was the end of the first day. I was like, "Hey, buddy, what's your name?" And he told me his name and I said, "Are you having a good time at camp?" And he said, "No, it's not very fun." I was like, "Oh, well, you'll probably have more fun like tomorrow when you come back or whatever." And he's like, "Yeah, I'm just not having a lot of fun here." But he was the kid that was storming
storming the
after
stage.
Oh,
Petra.
wow.
Yeah.
Oh
That's
yeah.
funny.
Well, the best indicator was Thursday morning. I usually think Grace Kids Camp, like we start out and Monday there's just tons of kids. And then by Thursday, you kind of see that
Yeah.
numbers have dwindled. No, I feel like there might have been more kids
Sure.
here on Thursday
Yeah.
than Monday.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. And it was
Good.
great Thursday night too to have all the like parents and grandparents come and get to see a little bit of and see the kids get all excited and get to see me kiss a pig. That
Yes.
was
Yep. That was a
the,
highlight.
that was for those who didn't hear my reference to it at 11 this weekend. The goal of raising funds for Filter of Hope was $2,000, and if the kids could raise $2,000 for Filter of Hope, then I had to kiss a pig. 'Cause
Yes.
each level would like the next level below that, like Randy and Denny would have to eat baby food and whatever. So kiss a pig, and I'll be honest, I was kind of like, I don't think kids are
Care
gonna
about
care
this,
about
yeah.
that, right? Like that's
Yeah.
not they were so into it
Yeah.
all week. They're like,
Yep.
"You're gonna kiss a pig," and I'm like, "Only if you raise the money."
Right.
And it was
And they
this,
just
like
did. They crushed it.
they like got like $3,500
Yeah,
or something. Right?
I'm anxious to hear. I don't think we had all the online stuff yet from Thursday night because I do think
Yeah.
some people. Now I will say that I think maybe the kids thought the pig would be live.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I
So,
decided
I
just
What
not,
is this?
I decided
I
not
do.
to reference it because
Yeah.
kids often, make wrong assumptions, and so I'm
Right.
just gonna go ahead and just not
Just
even
go.
address it.
I know, but I
Uh,
was like, I do think when Carrie said Barry's kissing a pig, I'm like, he's bringing one of the pigs here, and she was
Yeah.
like, no, it's on video, and I'm like, there's gonna be some disappointed kids because they totally think there's gonna be
Yeah.
a pig.
I
in
did
this
have one
building.
kid say something like, but otherwise, most kids are just
Yeah, I
excited.
didn't hear anything
and they all like
afterwards.
cheered in
Yes,
the
they
video
were
the
very
moment I kissed
excited.
Puddles. So
They were very excited. Yeah, it was a good week.
It was
So,
great. Yeah.
yeah. All right.
What else is going on? Are we supposed to just dig right into the message? No more.
Is there anything
no
else
more
going
small
on?
talk. No.
What'd you do for Father's Day?
We, my Annie, my third child is such a good cook, and she made us breakfast sandwiches
Whoa.
for in the morning, and then that night made this really good salad with peaches and goat cheese, and it was delicious. She's
Yum.
so great at that. So, but I did cast a show. I can't believe I didn't talk about it last. I cast the show. We had auditions and
Oh,
I
yeah.
never talked about it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So how'd that go?
It's great. It's such a great cast. And it's awesome. So I just wanted the rest. I think some
The
of
rest
the
of the
people.
world needs to
I
know.
think some of the friends of the pod were like, "Hey, didn't you talk about auditions?
Yeah.
It's all cast and great."
So how many people are in it? Too many.
I hesitate to say.
Awkward
Yeah.
silence.
I'm going to say around 75.
Didn't you say this was
Yes,
going to be like
I know.
50?
That's why I don't want to say anything
How did you get that high?
because there were a lot of good people, and the kids' chorus is bigger this time because it needs to be. So there's 24 kids in it. I mean, you take them
Yeah.
out of that 75, and you are down to 50. So there
There you go.
I did it. 50 adults. That's what I meant.
If
That's
you
what I
take
meant.
out all the principals
Yeah,
and
and the
singing
kids
parts,
yeah. If you take out
Yeah.
everything but the chorus,
Yeah.
there's like 20 people in
Yeah.
the show. So it's good. It's
All
a
right.
very good show.
When's the show again?
November. I think we open. I'd have to look at the 8th of November. 2 weekends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very
Okay.
great.
Olivia is one of
Yes.
the
Oh,
wives
that's right.
of Jacob's sons,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Yes, she is.
Of Naphtali.
Yes. Yes. Yep. She sure is.
I've seen a few videos of the show online, and they're all from like whatever that
1975.
they're very campy, and
Yeah.
so I am basically completely trusting Amy's sensibilities to make this
Don't blow
an
it.
awesome show.
I know. I hope I don't. I hope for those that do not like the show, they will walk away.
So we'll be
loving
redeemed.
It.
Yeah.
Yes, it will be the redemption of Joseph. It's all in my hands.
I love it.
Yeah.
All right. So for us, I need either encouragement or
Discouragement.
coaching,
Oh,
Okay.
because we have been a family that's like, hey, if you sign up for something, you're
You
not
do
allowed
it.
to quit.
right.
We let someone quit.
Milo quit football.
Well, so he
You don't have flag football to get to tonight.
no. So he signed up for too many things. That's what it
Okay.
came
Yeah.
down. He has flag football,
Yeah.
and then he was supposed to start football camp
Uh-huh.
today,
Wow.
and all the past couple days, he's like,
Well,
I don't want to
first
do.
of all, today is 950 degrees out.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
He should not be going to football camp.
So for the past few days, he's like, I don't want to go to football camp. I don't want to. And we're like, you got to go. And then last night they were like, we'll refund your money if you don't want to come or whatever.
Yeah.
So we're like, all right, yeah,
Sure.
sounds good.
Great.
So when he woke up, I was happy to tell him, hey,
Mhm.
we talked about it, and you don't have to go. You still have to go to flag football because you've been doing that already. But since you didn't start anything yet,
Right.
we're gonna let you sit this one out. He goes, oh, but I woke up and I was ready to go.
Oh my
I was like,
gosh.
which is it, man?
That's hilarious. So is
So-
he mad now?
I think he's over it by now, but this morning he was a little sad that we're
Yeah.
like, because I said, well, if we're gonna go, it starts right now, so you got. And he's like,
You
"No."
should have taken him because 5 minutes in this heat and he would have been like,
Yeah,
I'm out.
Yeah.
Check, please.
Well, we didn't
I'm
want him
out.
to start and then quit.
Yeah,
we just
that's,
wanted him
that's
to.
good.
Yeah.
I think if you change your mind beforehand, before you've like met your people
Yeah.
and started like being part of the team, that's fine. I think
All
that's
right,
fine.
that's good.
Plus, he sounds a little overcommitted right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because last summer Lane did soccer and he wanted to quit the entire time, and we wouldn't let him.
Yeah,
which was
I-
like punishment for us.
It is.
because we had to go sit there and watch him stand still.
Right. Well, I'm just gonna be honest. A lot of parenting feels like you're being punished.
While watching your child stand still.
Yes. Yeah, it's so true. But did you have a nice Father's Day?
Yeah, I did. I went, played golf, got in the pool, watched golf. The U.S.
Yeah,
Open was
yeah,
on.
They planned that well.
Yeah.
But on Father's Day.
So
Good.
yeah, it was good. It was kind of low key.
That's a
which
good
is-
Father's Day,
Yeah,
I
it's
think.
great.
What about you, Barry? Were you with your dad, with your
No,
father-in-law?
we didn't really do much Father's Day stuff
Yeah.
at all yesterday.
That's all right. Everybody's tired.
Everybody's tired. Liv and I are both having.
Exhausted.
I'm not just tired because of Grace Kids Camp. I just finished my marathon. I've been talking about it a couple
Yeah.
times, but like preaching 4 weeks in a row, funeral, 4 weeks in my Revelation class. Like I'm just, I'm toast.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're all kind of
And now you're
limping
not-
across the
you're-
finish line.
The series is finishing up with
2
your
more
dad.
weeks. It'll be
and-
Tim and then my dad.
okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
you
yeah.
get a break.
I do for 2 weeks, and then
Good.
we're doing Summerfest, and I'll
Yeah,
be back up.
right.
So,
Right. Good.
but guys, my Revelation class ended. People didn't leave. Like it was, it was like surprisingly.
Were you like, I got
consistent.
camp tomorrow. I gotta
No,
go
yeah,
home.
I did. Yeah, I did have a couple of moments that were pretty funny, but of just like Wednesday, I worked. I got here at 8:30, and I did go home briefly, but I basically worked all the way until 8:30 at night.
Yeah.
and was finishing my notes right as I was like getting in the car to get to Grace. So,
Was
my
the
gosh.
was the final class like the big reveal of who the Antichrist is?
No, but I was hinting the entire class that I would get to a point of describing why I believe that the Roman Empire never actually went away, and so that was my big
Ever?
Your
Like
big
it's still
aha.
there?
Right, it's the Roman Empire is
Is
still
us?
Yeah, the beast is still alive as
Oh.
well, and so I finally explained what I meant by that. On week
And how
4.
did they take that?
They loved it.
Good.
Those who spoke to
We'll
me.
never know. It was the
I
last
didn't have a
class.
lot of like. I didn't have anybody like coming at me for disagreeing with my
Okay.
like approach, which was shocking to
Yeah,
me.
that is shocking.
But no, it was. I was really encouraged, and
Good.
yeah.
Good.
So
All
no,
right.
I'm ready for a little mental break.
I would imagine you are. Yeah.
All right. So we are in week 3.
Yeah.
We just finished week 3 of our current sermon series, Undivided.
Yeah,
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
you did it.
Undivided.
You did it.
Every
I
time.
always want to say undisciplined.
Nope,
Well,
that's not it.
Not it at all.
That's not it. Undivided.
There is an old song by First Call or something called, and every time that name comes up, I think of that song, Undivided. Look it up, people. It's out
Yeah.
there. We could be doing it every Sunday.
Very
with this
timely for the
series.
kids.
Oh, it
Song by
it
First
hasn't
Call.
aged well. Let me tell you that. Okay, go ahead.
So Barry, you're here because you're one of our favorite children of God. Right?
Oh, thanks. Are we?
Of the,
Am I?
Children of the Most
Holy.
High.
Okay. All right.
And because you
and
gave
because I
them-
preach.
Yeah.
Oh.
And because he's a host on the
Yeah.
pod all the time.
Interesting.
Yeah. So tell us, share with us what the big idea of the sermon was last weekend.
Yeah. So basically, to kind of recap where we've been so far, week 1, we're all in Luke 6, all 5 weeks. We're doing the same passage, Luke 6:27 through the end of the chapter. And week 1 was all about this whole concept of loving your enemies in the first place. What does Jesus mean by that? And like, why is this so important to him?
Mhm.
Week 2, I wanted to get into the question of like, how do we actually do this? And I started from a really high level talking about the general like life style of somebody who is capable of loving their enemies. And that's someone who does the hard work and the training and the discipline to be a disciple of Christ when the pressure is off, so that they are ready to love their enemies when the pressure is on.
Mhm.
And then to this past Sunday, I was all about taking that how question and getting as practical as we could, looking at the last 2 verses of my part of the chapter. And so that's what it was. It was basically looking at 4 sort of things we can do, practical things we can do to love our enemies well, based on what Jesus says here. And a lot of it revolves around trying to take on the same level of compassion that our Father has, seeing our enemy differently, recognizing our own brokenness, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So that's what that was all about.
Am I wrong in saying that I feel like it's been a while since we've been like, here are 4 steps?
It's very,
So it
That's
feels like it's been a
so-
long time since we've done something like that.
Well, it's so not my style. And even in this case, there are other steps I could have come up with, but I felt it was important to stick purely with the text that we were working with.
Yeah.
So these 4 came directly out of this text only. Well, 3 of them did.
4 steps to loving your enemy.
Yeah, right. But it could have been based on the whole series. It probably could have been a 7-step process or something. But these are the 4 that I wanted to focus on. Based on what Jesus says.
It'll be interesting to see if the next 2 messages have some additional steps to what you
possibly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you shared part of the story of Corey Ten Boom,
Right.
where she was presented with a situation or an opportunity to forgive or express forgiveness to her enemy, love her enemy.
Right.
And she was a concentration camp survivor, and the person who was asking for forgiveness was a worker or a guard at
the
camp.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously this is like an extreme example of what it means to love your enemy.
Right.
Something I noticed in this story is the guard asked her for forgiveness.
True.
So the question is, what about situations where it's like my enemy doesn't really care about my attention, much less my forgiveness?
Right.
How do we handle situations like that? Where Corey, it was a impossible situation to imagine forgiving someone like that, but he was asking for it. So what about the people who don't ask for it?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. That gets into some of those other sort of ideas or principles that we cover in the 4 action items, including like changing the way that you see them, paying attention to your own brokenness. It's changing your heart, because not everybody is given the opportunity to shake the hand of the person that is the most specific enemy you could think of. So I acknowledge that. Really, why I use that story at the first part was just to acknowledge that this is really difficult for everybody, and even someone like her who made a career out of preaching about forgiveness. Did you guys ever read The Hiding Place? Like growing up,
I feel like I did growing up.
Yeah,
I cannot remember.
Anyway, she made a career out of teaching about forgiveness, and even she froze up when the object of her, the one who caused so much pain to her is standing in front of her. And that was my point initially. And then I came back to it at the end, because the last point was like, ask God for help. And so that's what she does. That's how she overcomes that difficulty of not knowing if she can forgive him, is that she just asked God for help, and then the Spirit transformed her. So, but you're raising a really good point. What do you do when they don't ask for forgiveness? And forgiveness and loving your enemy are very much related, but almost separate topics. Jesus talks so much about forgiveness, but loving your enemy does not. It's on the hope and the assumption that it will, over time, transform your enemy, that it will transform the world. But there is no like his examples of like, if someone slaps you on one cheek, turn the other cheek, and then you guys will be totally
Yeah,
cool.
right.
That's
Yeah.
not there. It's like, we don't know. That might not do anything. That might make them angrier. Like there's no guarantee that this will heal your relationship. Whereas if they ask you for forgiveness and you respond positively, then that is an opportunity to see transformation.
Yeah.
Well, and like that idea of not wishing misfortune upon them, wanting the best for them,
Right.
that may never be seen, heard, felt, or anything by them. Like, I guess my question would be, is that enough? Like, do you have to, if you're seeking restoration for your own soul, like you just can't live in this anger and hatred, and is it enough to just wrestle with God on it and be like, okay, I'm at a place where I don't want bad things to happen to them. I'm not glad. I want the best for them.
Right.
But I'm still not necessarily going to be in relationship with them.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think, I mean, this is hitting really close to home because this is what I'm wrestling with. Even as we were singing worship songs this Sunday, I'm like wrestling in my own heart about this, because there are a handful of people in my life that, because of the definition of enemy that we've been using, someone standing in the way of my flourishing and joy, like they would fit the category, even though calling them an enemy sounds really harsh, but they fit that category. And I feel like I have done the steps that I talked about in the message of like, I do see them, or try to see them the way God sees them. Like, I have compassion for them. I understand, like, I can even give them grace for the actions that they've taken, because I can understand perhaps where they were coming from with these actions. But I know there's a step in the process at some point where I then reach out to them and seek to reconcile and seek to heal that relationship. And I know that that's the case, but I've got so much pain still. It's still such a difficult burden for me to carry, that like getting to that point is still something I'm wrestling through and working. It's like, it'd be like Corey Ten Boom seeing the guard on the street and deciding to go across the street.
Right.
And then ask him to reconcile, even if he's not willing.
Yeah, even if he thinks he did nothing wrong.
Right.
Exactly. Which is a totally different situation than the guard coming right up to her and offering his hand. So like, I think I'm at the point now, I'll put it this way. If one of those people that I'm thinking of were to reach out and say, can we talk? I would immediately say yes. And I would make it a priority to have that conversation. And I would go into it with all the compassion and love I can muster. I'm still, I think I'm still a little bit away from being the one reaching out.
Yeah.
So that's where I am. And I don't feel great about that. And I do feel a little convicted preaching this message, thinking like, am I even fully living this out? I don't know. So I'm working through it. That's where I am.
Do you guys remember the story? I think it was like 2005 or 6 of the Amish school that got shot.
Yeah.
Like kids got shot in an Amish school.
Yeah.
And then the Amish community immediately forgave the shooter and his family or whatever. They like set up a fund to pay for the funeral or something. They attended his funeral, like
because he got shot in the process.
The shooter took his own life.
Oh, okay.
But they attended his funeral and they set up a fund to support his family and all these things. That's always the story I think of, like the modern day example of what it means, like radical forgiveness and radical loving your enemy seems like, because I always think I could never do that. I could never, and I'm part Amish. But I could never,
just not the part that counts.
Yeah.
Just not the good part.
I could never do that because they immediately, like the incident happened, the news came, and they immediately expressed forgiveness and compassion and empathy for the person that murdered some of their kids. You know?
Yeah.
Right. Well, and that to me, so say what you will about the Amish, but that to me is an example of when a community, not just an individual, but when a community takes the teachings of Jesus seriously and makes it part of their expectation, they can do some remarkable things as a community that any individual would likely not have the strength to do. And I think that's something to pay attention to, because we are such individualists, but the Amish are, in our context, notably different, where they are baking their entire society around the idea of being together and being one.
Yeah,
Well,
because that's one of my
community.
questions too. Like, what if our enemy isn't just another person?
Right.
What if it is a group of people or an ideology? What if our
Mhm.
enemy is a thing versus
Right.
just one person? So that's something I've been wrestling with too.
That's an interesting thing, though, that they did it so quickly. It's like this is just part of who we are and part of
Exactly.
who our community
The question
is.
wasn't, should we do
Should
this?
we
The
do it?
question
It was,
is,
we're doing
we're
it.
doing it. Yeah.
And all of us are doing it, whether we're there or not.
Right.
And if
Yeah.
you're not there, then we will help you sort through. I mean, I'm
Sure.
assuming that's
Sure.
that's the way that they would approach it, is like, oh, Tommy's not on
Yeah.
board at all with this forgiveness
Sure.
that we're offering and going to the funeral. So let's help him get to a place
Sure.
and disciple him in a way that he gets to a place where he is.
Just like
Right.
Tommy?
I was just making
name.
up a name.
Be like
Elijah.
Gerald.
Sorry. No, it would be like Elijah probably, or something like that. Ezra.
Jedediah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, and I think you're right. And we're just making things up here. I assume that it would be more difficult in a community with such strong principles. It would be more difficult to also then have the nuance to say, we're going to have these strong principles and act on them, but we're also going to acknowledge that not everybody's going to be on the
Right.
same. That's difficult. I would imagine it would probably be people feeling internally
And not saying anything.
and not saying
Yeah.
anything because they don't want to
Yeah.
like show themselves to be weak or against the community or something
Right.
like that. Yeah, it's complicated, but it's so fascinating. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, that is. I forgot all about that scenario.
So there's a lot of complexity in mercy and forgiveness. And the more like I watch these sermons and participate in this series, I feel like forgiveness and mercy become more complex for me. And one of the questions I had was, is there ever a point where forgiveness and mercy towards your enemy or towards someone that becomes enabling or condoning harmful behavior? So like, I have an enemy, they're doing stuff to me, I extend mercy and forgiveness. And that essentially like lets them off the hook, so to speak. And they do it again and they do it again.
Mhm.
And so I feel like I've asked this question every week, but
Yeah.
this is a silly example, but like my kids, we go to bed or they go to bed and inevitably they come out of their bed in their rooms.
Standing in the way of your flourishing.
Yeah. I'm like, I just want to sit here and not talk to you
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
for the rest of the night. And so they'll be like, and they come out 2 or 3 times and they'll say like, I'm sorry, I won't come out again or whatever. And I'm like, okay. And within 45 seconds, they're back out.
Mhm.
Yeah. So there's like a lack of accountability there
Uh-huh.
with the forgiveness and mercy part. So I'm wondering like, how do you account for that if it's like mercy and forgiveness, but no accountability,
Right.
mercy and forget? Like, is there ever a point where there has to be accountability and mercy and forgiveness, or how do those things play with each other?
I would like to respond to the question, but not with the example of your children in mind, because I think that let's think about a friend that keeps hurting you like emotionally. They keep doing something that just keeps breaking the relationship. I think two thoughts come to my mind. In that sort of scenario, I would first ask, again, thinking of that second point of remembering your own brokenness. How often has God extended grace and mercy to me,
Yeah,
even after I've continuously failed him?
For
And
sure.
How many times do I deserve that mercy and forgiveness?
mm-hmm.
Like maybe once if he's a good guy, but like 50, 100, 1,000 times, like, and yet it continues to be offered. And that to me should be at least one indicator of maybe we do need to offer a bit more than we would normally want to, because our God does. But the other thought I have is there are times if someone continues to hurt you, and I think we've talked about this on the pod in years past, but if someone is continuing to hurt you or take advantage of you, having mercy on them might actually involve removing yourself from the relationship so they can't keep hurting you.
Mm-hmm.
Because if them doing the damage to another person is what is causing them to be broken, then if you remove the possibility of them hurting you by stepping out of that relationship, that could be the most gracious or loving thing to do. So mercy and forgiveness might not look like allowing the pain and the suffering to continue. There might be a way to kind of break that chain.
It also might be the only way that they find their own healing. Like if you continue to be allowing them to hurt you over and over and over, and you continue to extend grace and mercy and stay in the relationship, it might be their only catalyst for you to finally say, I forgive you, I love you, and now I need to step out of this. I can't be a part of this cycle anymore.
Yeah,
and
that is
then-
accountability,
then-
I guess.
Then they have two choices. Either they stop the cycle and get help and move, or the relationship is fractured. And I don't know that you just continue to put yourself, especially if we're talking like physical harm or something like that. But it might be the most loving thing to say, I'm not going to enable this anymore, because you can border on that too. So I remember someone in my life, their parent had hurt them over and over and over and over. And finally they were just like, they went on a walk with their parent and said, look, I'm going to forgive you for all of it. And it's done. And their parent looked at him and was like,
what?
I did. Yes, exactly. For what?
Right.
Yeah.
But it didn't matter. And they didn't need them to acknowledge it. They just needed to be able to forgive and make that known that I've forgiven you, if you ever recognize, and then lived with no expectation going forward. Like, our relationship's intact. I have no expectations of you. You probably will hurt me again. You probably won't show up when I need you to, but I forgive you for all you've done, and I forgive you for what you will continue to do. And that's okay.
Yeah.
And and then just to put your expectations to a place where I don't expect you to be anything more than you've always been.
Yeah.
But that was not something where this person was being harmed physically, or I do think there are extreme circumstances.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that speaks to that's the first practical step that you offered as how to love your enemies, the unexpected mercy component. And shock them with unexpected mercy. Because extending mercy to anyone makes you extremely vulnerable.
Yeah.
And makes you vulnerable with your mental health, your emotional health. And so I want to be somebody who is known for and does extend people mercy, like unexpectedly and expectedly.
Sure.
But I have wrestled with, like, is there ever a boundary? And it sounds like, sometimes there has to be. You can step out of the relationship or whatever. To kind of protect yourself or preserve your well-being.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting too that Jesus used the example of lending without expecting to be repaid, because there's this sense with that whole without expecting to be repaid thing, where it's like I'm offering something, like I'm offering mercy, I'm offering my own resources, and there is a vulnerability in that, because if I give you a loan, you might not pay me back. And so I'm putting myself out on a limb. And Jesus is kind of saying,
that's what you should do.
Go ahead and put yourself out on the limb and don't even expect to get it back.
Yeah.
And so suddenly it changes it from a loan to a gift. And that takes away that sense of, like, it doesn't matter if they squander it, give it back or not. Like, I've already done the merciful act. And I think that is so interesting to consider, like, in all the different ways that might, different forms that might take with unexpected grace or mercy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So practical step number 2 on how to love your enemies. Remember the grace that you received. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah. Jesus says, you'll truly be acting as children of the Most High in verse 35. For he is kind to those who are unthankful and wicked. And when I hear that, I think, and I could be wrong, but I think that what Jesus is saying is not just, here, let me describe some characteristics about God. I think what he's wanting us to do is to remember, who is unthankful and wicked that God has been kind to, and to recognize, oh, that's me. Like I'm in that list of people that God has been kind to, because despite my ingratitude. Because when I think about my own brokenness and my own, like how often I've squandered the grace that God's given me, when I think about how many times have I sinned knowing that I've been promised to have freedom from the power of sin through the Spirit, like how often have I just spat in God's face with all the gifts that he's given me? Suddenly I'm like, oh, I am I'm profoundly blessed by a God who is giving me this blessing that I don't deserve at all. And when that happens, suddenly I start looking at others with potentially a different perspective. So I think having our own brokenness in mind is a significant step, because if we are holier than thou, then we are going to inevitably put ourselves on a pedestal over our enemies.
Yeah.
And that makes the true offer of mercy and grace more difficult.
Yeah.
Or impossible.
I knew someone in high school who was kind of known for being holier than thou a little bit. They would go around and they would, like, if they didn't like what you were doing, they were a part of the Christian community, but if they didn't like what you were doing, they would tell you or tell other people. Like,
wait a minute, I didn't go to high school with you.
I'm talking about you. And so, but if you ever snap back at them, like, yeah, but you do these things, their response would always be, yeah, but nobody's perfect.
Right.
And it's like,
yeah, but so I'm not perfect. Like, let me
right. And so, remember, I think this is what I've tried to pay attention to, not since that moment, but that I always think of that example in my own life of people that don't necessarily remember the grace that they've received to have that for other people. This is something I've tried to do since then. And it is the thing that helps me to avoid like getting bitter and getting resentful to people that I would consider enemies, because it's the one, it is something like remembering, like, I know my brokenness. Not everybody knows my brokenness, but I do. And if God's going to forgive me that for all that stuff, like, who am I to be like, no, I'm not going to extend mercy and to other people. But again, the whole, like, one of my enemies, he's not a friend of the pod, but
So you're going to name names?
I don't remember his name, but he's the guy who I gave a lot of money to for this car that I have right now. And I think he knew something was wrong with the car when he gave it to me or sold it to me. So he's my enemy.
Yeah.
But like,
he really is getting in your way of.
Yeah.
I think about him every day because I'm like, you knew that you were selling me a bad car.
Every time you start that car, you're like,
yeah.
Curse
well, he can't start the car, and that's
right. Anger is my go-to.
But I think about him all the time now because my car is broken and I've only had it for like 5 months. Yeah. But I do legitimately pay attention to, like, God has forgiven me for all these things in my own life.
Yeah.
I can extend this. I'm not going to go like scorched earth on this person. And my Facebook private message is where he and I would communicate. So I'm going to not do that. Even though I consider him my enemy.
You should send him a gift, man. Send him like a little
virtual gift.
I don't know. Find him online. Give a little.
But you are for sure gonna post about him, right? And say,
bad review.
Don't ever buy a car from him.
Oh, like, bad Google review
for sure.
For sure.
I've
got to do the accountability.
I've threatened to do that to a few customer service people.
Yeah.
Just leave a really positive review. That's just like, it's like, I'm sure he didn't know that this
that
problem and this problem. Yeah.
That he sold me a lemon. I think the whole humility thing is like the key. Like, I can very easily think, I'm loving my enemies, and I'm really great for doing that. And it's really, pride is like the worst. I think it could be one of the worst sins out there. Because I know there's no one is worse than the other, but if you are not couching everything in humility, like, everything we do could be like yeah, I'm a really, really good person for
Yeah.
doing
Right.
this.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's very easy to get caught in
Yeah.
that. Like,
There's a reason Jesus called the Pharisees whitewashed tombs, because
right.
they're beautiful on the outside
Right,
and they're
but
filled with bones.
right.
They're just, filled
Yeah.
with death.
Yeah.
Okay, so practical step number 3
Yes.
is see people with fresh eyes, or see your enemies with fresh eyes.
Right.
What did you mean by this?
So this, I kind of think of it as the flip of seeing yourself, seeing your own brokenness. And then it's, okay, now that we've done that work, let's have compassion as the Father has compassion. And what does that mean? It means looking at other people the way that God sees them. And I even did a little thought experiment with having everybody think of their enemy
Mhm.
and saying, all right, who does God see when he looks at that person? And I basically just listed out a bunch of things that are true, because this is true for everybody. But I was like, he sees a frightened child who is trying to make sense of a chaotic universe. He sees a broken person who he is just his heart is broken for the way that they keep making their world more broken, and what they're doing to you. He like all that stuff. And it's like, when we can start to see them for, as a child of God made in his image, and yet someone that his heart breaks for.
Mhm.
I mean, you'd think that would begin to change our own heart and our own perspective, where we start to recognize, yeah, I mean, they're not evil. They're broken, and think about their upbringing and think about what they've been facing in this life. And like, they were never given the tools to do X, Y, Z.
Right.
It's like, you start to think it's a step in the direction of having compassion for your enemies.
Yeah.
Like the Father has compassion.
I've had that conversation a lot with my husband, just because it, as with many people that we are in relationship with that love us, they actually have a harder time with our enemies than we do sometimes.
Yes.
And so there have been many times that Jeff is full ready to go scorched
Yeah,
earth on
right.
somebody that I'm like, okay, and I will say, okay, but let's think about what they've been through and how they got to where they are. And sometimes when he gets to a really difficult place, it's easier for me to circle back and be like, okay. You're right. I probably got you to this point because I was upset, and now you're
Yeah.
feeling protective of me, which
Yeah.
is very kind of him. But then when I'm trying to pull him back or rein him in, I'm able to then be like, okay, I need to look at it this way too. Like,
Yeah.
this is the reason they're acting this way is because of this, this, and this, or because we don't know why they're acting this way, but we have to believe we all have brokenness in our stories. We all have hard things. And I was thinking, not only is this like love your enemies, this is also like love the person even that you are in relationship with that is
Right.
doing something at the moment that is hard for you. It's not like they're your enemy and they're not going to be an ongoing enemy, but in this moment, like today, they are getting in the way of my happiness
Yeah.
and my flourishing and whatever, for whatever reason. And if you can view everyone, even in those smaller moments of, you're not my enemy, but right now you are getting in my way, how can I sit down and have this conversation with you, keeping all of these things in mind? Because I need to love you well in this moment too.
Yeah.
I think it kind of is all encompassing when you start to live your life this way.
Do you think we're born with the ability to be empathetic? Or is that something that we have to learn? Some people have to learn and develop. And if so, what are like the spiritual practices or disciplines that we can put ourselves through that helps us grow in our empathy?
That's interesting. I would, this gets back to week 2, where we talked about the training that goes into becoming Christ-like. That makes me think of the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5 and 6 and 7, where Jesus does explain some of the things that I think would shape you to be the kind of person who's empathetic. A lot of it falls in the category of what I would call like dying to self. And so he has all these things that he says about, like, when you give, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Like, give in such a way that there's nothing that you're going to get out of it other than simply being generous, and no one's going to know, not even like, you're not even going to pay that much attention to it. Just do it. Things like that. Praying in private. Like, he's helping us to start taking away, start making ourselves less. And then there comes in all the other stuff about like reconsidering how God looks at other people. The poor are blessed. The meek will inherit the earth. Like, shape have a kingdom oriented lens, a God's kingdom oriented lens when we see the world. So once we've started making ourselves less, we start seeing the brokenness of other people around us. It becomes easier for us to then step in with a more merciful perspective. So it's that whole lifestyle of discipleship where we are being shaped to be like Christ. And you don't always know how, I mean, being obedient to his teachings in this area over here might actually shape you in this area over here. When you're learning how to be patient with, your temper, well, that might actually help shape you to be more merciful when someone does something to you that hurts you, because you're learning how to be patient. It doesn't feel like it's all connected, but it kind of is. You're becoming like a whole person that's looking more like Jesus. So that would be my very long answer to a short question.
Yeah. Because there are people that just kind of naturally seem really good at being empathetic and having compassion. And then there are people that obviously don't.
Right.
And so if it's something that we can grow in, I think that's important for us to take away, because I don't know that I'm naturally good at having empathy. I like to withdraw from versus like step into situations where I can extend empathy. Like mercy to me is different than empathy. Mercy is like, yeah, we're good. I forgive you. Let's go our separate ways, whatever.
Right.
Empathy is like, I can put myself in your position,
Right.
and I have a harder time doing that.
Right. I think a lot of it does have to do with how we're raised. I think parents can shape the empathy muscles of their kids by helping them think about other people and not just having everything revolve around a child as like the king of their castle.
Right.
It's like that's something that can be shaped. But I don't know that anybody wakes up or is born and is just automatically empathetic. I do think there's some personality in there, there's some hard work in there, intentionality, but it's something that we can develop in, I think.
I agree. I think it comes from your parents. It comes from the people teaching you how to take even the hardest situation and figure out how to learn from it and move on from it, um and putting yourself in situations that are uncomfortable and you aren't the center, and you're around people that have it harder than you do so that you can understand where they're coming from. I think the arts are a beautiful way to do this. I think the arts are a way, whether it's through a movie or a show or music or whatever, of speaking to people and helping them learn lessons in a way that is palatable for them. Like they can see things in a different way when you're watching. I mean, I think of how many movies I've watched that I have like, oh, it opens my eyes to a whole new world. And I think those can be also ways of learning, like putting yourself in somebody else's position or in their world as you watch this piece of art develop in front of you.
Yeah.
I'm always going to advocate for the arts people.
We'll always cut that out too.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Great.
So practical step number 4 is ask God for help.
Yeah.
And my initial, when I heard this, I was like, yeah, that makes sense for me. But for somebody who's like, well, Christians are my enemy. I used to be a Christian, or I used to go to church or whatever, but church is my enemy or whatever. Like, but if I send somebody this sermon, I'm like, here's how you can grow in loving your enemies and whatever. What about the people that are like asking God for help? Is like, that's not where I want to go. God, the people who believe in God are the ones that, like, what do we say to the skeptics out there who struggle with this part of loving your enemies?
Well, I would say don't ask Christians for help. Ask God for help. And if they don't believe in God or they refuse to acknowledge God, that's a whole other situation. I think for someone who does believe in God but has been burned by the church, I would just say, hey, you probably have high opinions of Jesus, right? You probably think that he's an example that Christians have failed to follow. So follow his example, the one that Christians haven't lived up to. And even he asks his Father for help, and even he seeks that relationship with God. You can have that relationship whether or not you even are a part of a church right now. Like, and who knows, that could be the beginning of a path into a new kind of Christianity where you're not surrounded by a bunch of, hypocrites that do all the things that you think are reprehensible.
Yeah.
So I would say the relationship with God can be independent of your feelings of the people claiming to follow him.
Yeah.
But that's my gut reaction. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's how I feel too. And I have board game groups with people that are not Christians or used to be Christians or
Right.
whatever. And I have been looking forward to the sermon series because I've been like, this is something that I can send to people who either have left the church or feel a certain way about the socio-political climate of our day and where we are as a society or whatever. These sermons are something that I could send to them. But because they hold a grudge toward people like us, Christians and church and all that stuff. So that
Just
was,
let them know I forgive them.
okay. That's off to a good start.
Yeah.
I asked this last week and I'll ask it again because I like to know if what I'm doing is accomplishing anything.
Sure.
Is making the effort, just making the effort to love the enemy, is that enough, or is there something we should be looking for that's like, okay, we get it and it's working? Because I was like, okay, we're in week 3 of a 5-week series.
Right.
The people of grace, we're gonna come out of this series. We're gonna be like, in an election year, we're like, nobody's going to get mad. I'm not going to see anything on the internet from grace people who have heard all these sermons because that will be my sign that this is working. But I doubt that's going to happen. I don't know. And so what is it? What is the thing that we should be looking for to be like, this is working?
Well, I don't want to, I was going to tell you guys about this offline. I won't use any names, but I've heard already of a couple of people that had major beef with one another, lots of broken relationships and lots of pain. After this last sermon, they both happened to go to Grace, but they usually go to different services, so they don't see each other. They went up, shook hands, and then embraced.
Oh, wow.
When I tell you afterwards who they are, you'll be like, whoa. But that, to me, is an example of, it is working. We see already within our own congregation people who are able to start the very long process of trying to heal a relationship. But I think beyond that, again, to get back to that concept of corporately, I do think that come election time, if you were to just do a standard poll of people living in Northern Marion and all of Hamilton County, and you were to just look at their behavior online, and you were to pull grace people out of that general, I think we might be slightly different than the norm at this point. Maybe more different than the norm, but I think the more we talk about this stuff, the more, remember all that stuff I was saying about like Israel, Palestine, when that all was starting up in the service, like the more we talk in these ways, the more we talk about the third way, it does start to shape a community. And I genuinely believe our community could be slightly different from the default, and having a series where we just keep coming back to loving your enemies 5 weeks in a row. Sure, some people are going to be blasting those people online or whatever, but I think there will still be some who maybe have that moment of hesitation of, do I really need to post this? Or like, that's not a very loving thing to be doing towards those people I can't stand. And like, at least that's my, I'm naive, but that's my hope. And I would almost say I'm starting to believe that it's possible that could be where we move. And seems like it's kind of a very small baby step when you compare that to like the Amish community forgiving someone like a mass murderer. But man, we've got to start making progress. And so I'm going to hope that the work that we're doing here is going to bear fruit, even a little bit of fruit. Yeah.
And maybe it's a one person at a time type of deal. Like there are people in my life that I'm like, I could be better. I could be better at caring for them and having mercy towards them and having empathy towards them. And maybe that's enough, maybe just seeing how it plays out in my own efforts or my own relationships and situation. Maybe that is enough. I don't need to see this giant wave of change happening in order to believe that God is moving through the effort of loving our enemies.
I tell my kids that all the time about everything that they're upset about, or like sometimes you're part of a movement, sometimes you are part of like systemic change that needs to happen, but more often than not, it's what are you doing day to day, minute to minute with the person right in front of you. And it is going to be one person at a time. It's not going to be some overwhelming. There are moments of that, but more often than not, don't sit around waiting for something big to happen. Do your part each day and watch just the change in your own life and the people around you. And that can be enough.
That'll be enough.
Yeah.
All right. Where do we go next? What are we doing after this?
So we're moving on to the next section, verses 37 through 42. And it'll be Pastor Tim. And it's all about judging others, which I think if you kind of look at how Luke is framing this message of Jesus, it seems like you could put, and the NLT does this, put a big section heading there, like, all right, now we're on to a new topic. We've talked about loving our enemies. Now we're talking about judging others. But I see a whole lot of continuity between, and I think this is probably more of Jesus applying the loving others or loving your enemies concept, because judging others is a significant part of our enemy hate. So Tim's going to come bring that message, and we'll just keep hopefully shaping this community.
All right. Yeah, so he'll be here next week. Huh?
Yeah, Tim will be here. He'll join us.
That's fun.
It's always a good time with Sir Tim. In the building.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll be back next week, and until then, Amy, can you do this? All right.
Yeah. To do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God.
And we'll see you on the other side of Sunday.